on behalf of IGNCA Bengaluru. I welcome you all once again. It's nice to see people from IGNCA Delhi and Virendra Bhanguji and Advaita Vadini Kaul. Is she here?
No, she was
all right. So we here gathered today to inaugurate the Sanskriti Vaibhav Shrinkhala, which is a lecture series aimed at increasing awareness about Bharatiya culture, and we're very fortunate to have Professor Bharat Gupta, who is a trustee of the Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts and is also a member of the Executive Committee of IGNCA. We welcome you, sir, to IGNCA Bangalore. It's my honor to introduce his various achievements to all of you today before the lecture. Professor Bharat Gupta is what I call a Renaissance man. He's a polymath whose research and intellectual interests span a wide range of topics from the Dharma Shastras to contemporary Indian thought. He's an Indian classicist, he's a theatre theorist, a sitar and surbahar player, a musicologist, a cultural analyst, and a newspaper columnist, to top all of that. So Professor Gupta was born at Moradabad in Uttar Pradesh, India, and a small city known for Hindustani classical music and Urdu poetry. He learned to play the sitar and surbahar for about 8 years under the eminent musician Pandit Uma Shankar Mishra. He also studied ancient Indian texts and modern Indian music, the Yoga Sutras and the classics under Acharya K.C. Brihaspati and Swami Kripalvananda. His doctoral dissertation was a comparison of Greek and Indian dramatic theories as given in the Poetics and the Natya Shastra. He's trained both in modern European and traditional Indian educational systems and has worked extensively in classical studies, theatre, music, culture, media studies, and researched extensively as a senior fellow of the Onassis Foundation in Greece on the revival of ancient Greek theatre. Professor Gupta regularly writes for research journals, national newspapers on cultural, educational, and relevant issues. As a reviewer, he is a frequent contributor to the Journal of Sangeet Natak Academy, the Journal of Music Academy Madras, and the Indian Musicological Society Baroda. His interest in Indian music has not waned despite his contemporary and global perspectives, and his second book on the translation of the 28th chapter of the Natya Shastra and on the treatment of the musical scales is now published, and he's continuing his study of the Natya Shastra and is currently working on 2 books on the Natya Shastra as well. So I welcome you, sir, once again to this lecture, and I'd like to note that there are many eminent scholars and academicians, Dr. S.R. Leela, Srimati Chudamani Nandgopal, and I'd like to welcome Vinay Chandra of the Takshashila Institute of Studies as well. I welcome one and all, and I'd like to invite Dr. Gupta to present his lecture. Thank you.
Yastanmayad hridaya samvadana kramena drak chitra shakti gana bhumi vibhag bhagi harshollasat parvikara joshah karoti vande tamam tamahamindu kalavatamsam. Madam Director, Shri Krishna Bhakti, so many of you eminent scholars here from this wonderful city of Bengaluru, my young friends, I am deeply honored to be here among you today and to have an opportunity to say something on this new series, Sanskriti Vaibhav Shrinkhala. I had an occasion to initiate the idea in Delhi, and it has been put so promptly into action in Bangalore. And I have been given a chance to start the first kick, so to speak, on it. I hope I prove myself worthy of it. I was given a long introduction, a kind one. Actually, it's just putting in a nutshell what some eminent people, some teachers and gurus have given to me and enabled me to do certain things. Now, I have taken today a topic which to some people might seem very questionable, very doubtful. We are very much acquainted with the common saying on television, and you know television now wields a huge stick in opinion building. And this common saying is that we have the modern constitution. अब तो हमारा संविधान ही सब कुछ है. So there may have been smritis earlier, there may have been certain codes of conduct prescribed, but that is not relevant. You see, whenever somebody mentions that, look, this is what used to happen in old times, good or bad, the very first thing we say is that, how is it relevant? We have the constitution, and let's talk about it. Nothing else is relevant. And politicians of all kinds and colors say that this is the primary text which is going to guide us. People like me who have, rightly or wrongly, this notion that Shastras are not meant for just a few hundred years or just for a phase of civilization. But the Shastras have something very deep and profound. Are anthropocentric. That is, they are revolving around anthropos, human being, man, woman, in the interest of mankind. But what about those who are not mankind? I don't mean just womankind, please. Of course, mankind here means mankind, womankind. But what about those who are not Homo sapiens? They are in huge numbers. They talk about them. They consider that as a value. Because one has to think that they are also life. And if it is not very unsecular to say so, you may be born as one of them. According to the Hindu belief, I may be born as a lizard, as a serpent, as a cockroach. And if that can happen, then they also matter. And if I forget that, then I have endangered myself by creating a hostility by so many forms of life. If I have othered them, if I have separated myself from them, if I have drawn a line between me and those all millions of forms of life, then I have created a problem. And are we not now occupied with this crucial question as to how will man sustain himself, how will woman sustain herself on this planet in the years to come? Which constitution, sir? American, French, German, Indian talks about that? Is there a constitution which thinks about this? Latest problem of of sustenance of life form in future centuries. But these very old texts, smritis, they talk about it. It is part of their central vision. Because creation was not for the sake of man. Creation is, in its own logic, larger than the interest of man. And if man is able to find a place, proper place in it, then man shall be happy. Human being shall be happy. You see, this is the basic difference between what is called the classical approach and the romantic approach. In the romantic approach, you think about things as you would like them to be. In the classical approach, you think about things which you better accept in order to have a reasonable, happy life. And that you should not transgress, that you should not exceed the line which the order of creation, which the order which sustains this world has set for you. So it is this vision of humility which marks the classical world. And the romantic world knows no borders for imagination. So it would like to jump on to the moon and then to Venus and then to other stars and other galaxies and so on and so forth, and is happy with going out and out and out and not seeing the place of humankind within. I have given you this as a broad perspective. Now to come to certain very specific things. Smritis are not just works of philosophic expositions. They are works of conduct. How one should act in life, according to which principles one should act in life, and why it should be so. What do the Smritis define? Smritis define what was called in old language Varna Ashram Dharma. Now, the moment we use these words Varna Ashram, we encounter a kind of apartheid. Intellectual apartheid, Varna, caste, it's non-democratic, it's hierarchical. And as one great philosopher, Dumézil, I think he said that this is the description of Homo hierarchicus. The Hindu believes that mankind is destined to live in hierarchy. Well, it is true that Varna is hierarchical. In some aspects it is hierarchical, but in certain other aspects it is a mistake to call it hierarchical. If I am standing here, then I am standing on my own feet. I cannot stand without my feet. You have the phrase that he has not found his feet. Finding feet means finding my place. So if the Purush Sukta says that the feet consists of the Shudra, then that does not mean the Shudra is replaceable or the Shudra is low. In certain respects, there is a role which could be considered as low, but then it sustains. It has to be seen as a paradigm. It has to be seen as something which is irreplaceable, essential, part of the whole, without which the whole will come to an end. As long as you see hierarchy, as long as you see only one line, you do not see the wholeness. There has been no society on earth which was not hierarchical. And the present day society is much more hierarchical. Our democratic leaders lead life which the great monarchs like Ashoka and Akbar could not even dream of. The luxury, the wealth which they command, the enjoyment which they have exceeds all the glamour the great monarchs and the emperors have. So, society is still hierarchical. We have not.
Those monarchs led a very simple life.
And many of those monarchs, as Krishna Bhattaji says, led a very, very simple life, historically recorded. The point I am making is very simple. That we don't have to be apologetic about the idea of Varna. The idea of Varna or hierarchy, distribution of professions, was also welcomed by certain very eminent thinkers, including in the West, like Plato. Plato believed in a society in which there were people on the top called the guardians, and people in the second and the third rank. So, the idea that all men are equal, all men are born equal, they have nothing to lose but their chains, as Rousseau said, the first line, need not be taken so literally. And this whole concept of equality should not be romanticized. The Smritis, when they talk of Varna and Ashram, also talk along with Varna of the Ashram. What is ashram? You know the 4 ashrams. Now, one may not define a human life in exactly the same terms as our ancestors used to define it, in terms of brahmacharya, grihastha, vanaprastha and sannyas. But then this is the biological cycle and will always remain so. When you are young, you have to learn. When you are elderly, you have to sustain. You have to work for creation of prosperity. When you are not so young, you have to accept the fact that you cannot control. And when you are older, then you have to sit back and analyze and meditate. If you can't do that, you will be very miserable. You will continue to hope that maybe you will be the next Prime Minister, but that is not going to happen. The whole idea of ashram was based on something very beautiful. So, what was this beautiful thing which the beautiful Manusmriti tells you? That one of the ashramas is going to sustain the other 3. The grihastha, the Mahabharata, in the very first chapter, Sambhava Parva, mentions this. He says, which is the highest of the ashramas? Of course, sannyasis would like to say, Babaji's ashram is the highest. But that's not what Mahabharata says. Mahabharata says, grihastha is the highest because it sustains the other 3. Sannyasi lives on bhiksha. So does the student, and so does the Vanaprastha. Now, look at this. Indian society, ancient ideal was very clear that you will produce wealth and you will use this wealth to sustain the student. Today, nobody believes in free education. We are day in and day out trying to sell a philosophy where the student must pay. And if you are going to do the most covetous course, say at Harvard or Berkeley, in MBA, then you take a massive loan, you pay for tuition there, and then you work for several decades, if not two, at least for 1 decade to take off that loan. And for that you have to live somewhere in North America. I think the old idea that the grihasth will give bhiksha to the batuk, to the student, will maintain the ashrama, was a much better idea. Because education was more accessible. It is easy to say that the non-Brahmins were not taught Vedas. It was true to some extent. Even today, everybody is not taught nuclear physics. There is a selection process. Everybody doesn't get into Harvard today. Only some lucky ones do. So, there is always a process to it. But you don't remember and talk the fact that education was free. And you got the education and you gave the dakshina after the education was concluded, not before. Today you have to give the dakshina before you get the education. That is
before you get the admission.
Before you get the admission, sir. Right. Thank you for correcting me. That is called Kali Yuga. Which is a better constitution, sir? Manusmriti or the modern constitution under which every political party today in the parliament wants to commercialize Indian education? So, Varnashram Dharma is not to be seen only in terms of certain jati, castes, which are operating in the arena of political struggle. It is not to be seen simply in terms of reservation, in terms of distributing the state collected kitty into different people. It is to be seen in certain fundamental concepts. That your responsibility towards the old, the aged. You see, today we want to make a law. And we want to safeguard human interests, human rights by making a law. See, even the freedom of your wife has to be guarded by making a law. You have to give her an opportunity to say that, yes, tonight it was not marital rape, it was love making. This is the discussion point now. We distrust ourselves so much that we just wanted law. And it is not a law which talks of equality. It is not a law which talks of trust. It is not a law which talks of giving. All the smritis are based upon the idea of giving. About freedom. Certain institutions. I mean, there are dozens of examples and I can give you. But I'll give you some very easy examples to follow. Today, there is only one kind of marriage law for Hindus. The Hindu Marriage Act of 1956 or something like that. Please correct me if there is a lawyer here. Manu had 8 laws. There were 8 kinds of marriages in classical India. Today we have only Brahma Vivah, the first kind mentioned. That is, the parents give away the girl to somebody who comes to marry at the door of the girl. That is called Vivaha. It could be the other way, which was practiced once and was called Avaha, where the girl went to the house of the bridegroom. But that was the first kind, in which there was Kanyadan. You see, our understanding of our texts has come to suffer a lot. One lady who was a Sanskrit professor, when she started the process of marrying her daughter, then in the middle of the ceremony, the daughter said, "What is this Kanyadan? Am I a sheep or a goat that you are giving me in dan?" No Kanyadan. There will be no Kanyadan. And she did not allow the ritual of Kanyadan to happen. And the marriage was, concluded without Kanyadan. So what we have done is not even to understand the fundamental idea that dan does not mean giving something in charity. The word dan means giving something you love out of heart to others, because you are giving something precious. And you're giving your daughter, which is very precious, to somebody. And this is an alliance between 2 families. So this was the Brahma Vivah, which we still follow. Then there was another kind of Vivah, Deva Vivah, in which if you have done a great yajna, then you could give your daughter to the priest. You see, modern societies are a victim of what is called presentism. They look upon present values as the best value ever created, and they impose it as the best value on ancient societies. So the very idea that a daughter can be given to somebody who has done yajna for you, the ritvik or the priest, is objectionable. But if you look at the value systems of ancient society, it was a highly admirable thing. I mean, when kings gave their daughters to other kings, you say this was for political alliance. Like one great Yadav leader of Bihar giving his child in marriage to another great Yadav leader of Uttar Pradesh. You approve of it. But if you give your daughter to the chief priest, then you say this is very objectionable. So we don't ever want to follow the spirit of the thing. We want to castigate it. That was the second kind. But that offered a freedom. You see, that the third was Prajapatya. That is, I gave my daughter to an able student. And I said that, okay, you go and be happy. Right? Then there was yet another form in which you could give the daughter and maybe pay a little money for it. It is not impossible, that still happens. Only that it is no longer legal. But for Manu, it was legal. Then there was a form in which no evidence was required. A young man could marry a young lady. A young lady could say that, yes, I accept you as my husband, and that was called Gandharva Vivaha. And if there was a dispute, then by and large, maybe with a little bit of suffering, but at the end, it was the word of the woman that carried. And without somebody having an evidence, it was considered as a legal marriage. That was Gandharva Vivaha of Manu. Indian courts are riddled with cases where women say that he promised marriage, he cohabited, he considered me as his wife, and now he has forsaken me. So who is better? The present constitution, which has no protection for a woman of this kind, or the ancient system in which Gandharva Vivaha was a legal system? You have the case of Shakuntala. You have several other stories there which are substantiated. So, Gandharva Vivaha, which we are now calling love marriage, is actually a very old Indian institution. There were 2-3 other kinds of marriages which were not considered to be good, but were considered as concessions in apad dharma or in makeshift arrangements. I don't want to go into that. The point that I am making is very clear, that there was greater diversity of law. You see, today, all marriage laws are very oppressive. It has to be according to, number one, a particular religious sect. So, either you marry in modern Indian state according to Hindu law, or according to Muslim law, or according to Christian law, or if you don't want to marry on the basis of religion, then under the Special Marriage Act. And there are very few marriages that take place under the Special Marriage Act. Almost all marriages are registered under either a religious act. Now, in the Hindu law today, both the parties have to be Hindu. In the Muslim law, both the parties have to be Muslims. In Manu, there is no such restriction. There's no such restriction. The restriction is only that there should be Kanyadan, that it should be an alliance between two families, and even if that is not to be followed, there should be mutual consent of two partners. In Gandharva Vivaha, there is no restriction that you have to belong to the same sampradaya, that you both have to be Shaiv, that you both have to be Jain, or that you both have to be Sikh. There is no such restriction. Of course, we can't talk of Sikh because that's a later development. I'm again and again trying to remind you, and it is not just a glorification that I am doing, that this was a more accommodative and liberal society. Then the whole concept of rina, obligation. See, Smritis and Smriti law is based upon the fact that you owe things to others. The whole concept, ancient concept, that I have 5 kinds of rinas. I have Deva Rina, therefore I do puja, because the gods created me. I have Guru Rina, because I took education, and therefore I must give something back. And you had to give something to your Guru all your life. I am not just glorifying it. It is practiced to this day. In the world of musicians, on Saraswati Puja, everybody goes to their Guru and makes a gift. It's practiced even now. In the traditional order, you respect your Guru all your life and you do something. You keep repeating the gift. So you are bound by the Rina. You are bound by a duty. Modern constitutions are not bound by duty. They pursue the romantic ideal of freedom.
Rights.
Freedom. Because rid is something that binds you. But freedom, forget, go ahead. There is a fundamental difference in the human relations that you will create when you believe in this kind of freedom and if you believe in the concept of Rina. So there was Deva Rina, there was Guru Rina, Pitri Rina. Yeah, Guru or Rishi Rina is the same. Then there is Pitri Rina. Now Pitri Rina does not mean that you have to obey your father or your mother blindly. Actually, it means that you have to create progeny, raise them as able citizens or able people who can be socially useful. And then there was Bhuta Rina. That is, you are responsible to an environment. You are responsible to the trees, the spirits of the trees, to birds, to animals, and you had to give something to them. And finally, there was Atithi or Manusha Rina. That is, it was your duty to look after the stranger who has come to your house. Atithi, somebody who comes without notice, without any agreement, without any prior deal, but who is just there, and you have to look after that. So, the concept of what is good, what is Shreyas and what is bad is entirely different. It is based on an attitude in which you are bound by certain obligations. Now, this whole discourse which we created of freedom was created under a misconception. We were looking for freedom from certain habits which were acquired as a result of social oppression, not as a result of philosophic thought. And so we said that look, if you just break the caste system, then you get true freedom. And under that, without understanding the purpose of Varna, responsibility, we considered that we were following a highly oppressive system. You see, India was a prosperous society, nobody can doubt it. You don't need statistics from learned people like Amartya Sen about it. The simple fact is that it was looted and plundered repeatedly means that it was a very prosperous society. And if the Varnashram system was so dirty, if it was so oppressive, there could not have been a prosperous India. A prosperous India for thousands of years meant that the Varnashram system was highly productive. There are many ways in which one can expand upon it. One should not draw the conclusion that I am a status quoist, that I am asking you to follow the Jati Vyavastha as we have inherited. Because most of the definitions of Jatis which we believe in now have disappeared. Because these were all economy based. So who was a kayasth, for instance? A kayasth was a profession. Somebody who worked in the municipality. Somebody who worked in an office. Kayena sthita iti kayastha. Today, somebody may be born in that name, Jati name, but may have an entirely different profession, like he may have gone into the army. So, the older orders have changed. We cannot follow them. We should not try to follow them. But we must understand that the primary difference between those who shall occupy the pursuit of the intellect, those who shall occupy defense or protection, those who will generate wealth, and those who would provide services, this will remain in every society. Only it will get redefined according to the technological conditions. And the technological conditions will provide us a new prosperity. So, the Smritis will, if one applies them, or if one applies modern technology with the idea of obligation, with the idea of sharing, with the idea of rina, then it will create a more prosperous society. We have today created a system in which there is fundamentally the idea of competition, of allocation of rights. Who has a greater right? And whose right? Now, in this system, there is no solution. Because a society based upon asking for rights becomes more and more selfish. But a society which is based upon the concept of obligation is a productive society, because it is based on the concept of giving. When you talk about rights day in and out, when you agitate for those rights day in and out, when you obstruct the roads under activism, then you are actually taking away the rights of so many others. But when you operate the other way, that is, when you think of providing, when you think of giving, then you will have an entirely different system. So today, let us see in the education field, there is a huge quarrel about who will get how many admissions and where and scholarship, etc., because you are not willing to give. But if you start on the philosophy of giving, if more people are ready to provide funds for education, then you will not have the quarrel about who will get how many things. The same applies to health sector, because you have to learn to give. And the governments have to learn how to provide incentive for people to give. Manusmriti says, the Artha Shastra also says, that the king should collect very little tax. According to Shastra, the highest rate of tax was about 15%, 1-5. Modern governments believe that taxation rate should be very high. Nowhere in the world it is less than 33%. Direct taxation. Then there is a lot which is indirect taxation. The whole idea is that the government can take away your wealth and will then provide you education, will then provide you health, then it will provide you protection, it will provide you freedom from criminals obstructing your life. The government will do everything after taking heavy taxes. And we know that this breeds a society of distrust, because people do not trust the government, as the governments are not able to live to their promises. The whole of the earlier system was based upon giving greater freedom, where people were supposed to create education, where people were supposed to create medical health sector, where people were supposed to create arts and culture. It is not only the kings who made the temples. Even the craftsmen would take a certain time out of their daily work and do something only as upasana, only as freedom. So, the idea of what was the Smriti has to be seen in that perspective. I'll say one thing more regarding Smritis, and which is very crucial in modern times. All the Indian codes, the Smritis, believe that moral codes change with time and place. They are not eternal. Shruti or Ved is eternal, but Ved does not have codes. Ved does not have do's and don'ts. Ved has only knowledge, which will enable you to do and understand what is right and wrong. The moral codes will go on changing with time. So, if you look upon Smritis, you will find that so many of the the codes of conduct underwent change. There were many prescribed rituals and acts or laws which were abandoned. For instance, the system of niyog. Earlier there was the system of niyog, that if somebody could not have a male progeny, then he could ask a rishi, a muni, a relative to procreate in his wife, and that was illegal and recognized. Then later on it was abandoned, although it continues as lokachar in certain ideas, certain parts of India, but the moral code changed. So the very fact that moral code is not something which will remain the same till Qayamat, till the last day of creation, till apocalypse, is contrary to the fundamental beliefs of Smriti. Therefore, Smriti welcomes welcomes change in the moral codes. And it is based on the very fundamental principle that there have to be different laws for different parts of the country, different kinds of concessions, and not a strict single-handed prescription for everybody. All the Smritis made a distinction between Shastrachar and Lokachar. So they had a diversity of law. Today, although on paper, customary law exists in Indian system, but in practice, It does not. Customary law is not cared for much. It is one law all over India, and people from all over the country are forced to follow it in the name of modernity, even though it is highly inflexible. And if certain old practices are going on, then they look down upon those practices. So we have created a schizophrenia, that there is a modern life and there is a traditional life. Traditional life is backward looking, modern life is forward looking. I think if we study the Smritis again, the Dharma Shastras again, there are many things that we can take from them. There is no time to give you more examples, but I can give you several more examples, very practical examples about this. However, I have taken a lot of your time. Thank you so much for a patient listening. I am grateful that I had this opportunity. Thank you. In the Indian system, the guru is not something who is only Vayovriddha, that is bigger in age, but it has to be Jnanavriddha. So I would say adopt that method. Read more, learn more, don't jump to conclusion hurriedly, spend time and argue. And I am sure that you will be able to make a dent.
Any more questions, please?
Yeah, there is.
Hello, sir. I too believe whatever you said, many of the things. But one confusion always prevails over me, that when we talk about education, we have two kinds of education, Paravidya and Aparavidya. So in ancient time, so far whatever I know very little of whatever texts, the Gurukulas were more of Aparavidya. So Paravidyas, in Mahabharata we can see the Gurus were teaching archery and things like that, Pakshatriyas and things like that. But other Paravidyas, whatever we talk about skill development today, it was in the families or in communities or different professions that is followed by different communities. So where is this kind of a centralized kind of an education where it is for every kind of an education? So when we talk about modern education, what we are talking about today, it's from pure science to skill development to Barbary to fashion designing and everything. So is it not we are mixing things here, the ancient times more, the education with respect to Aparavidyas in Gurukulas with matas and different practices. And
Okay, I get what you're saying. Now first let me remove a lack of information. You see, this whole idea that the Gurukulas were teaching only spiritual subjects. They were teaching only Vedanta, they were teaching only the ultimate. This is not true. We have so many Shastras.
Yeah, I agree that.
They are Shastras for Adhyatma Vidya.
Yeah, metallurgy, everything you have a Shastra.
And Gurukulas were teaching not just those. They were teaching things like Natya Shastra. They were teaching things like Dhanurveda. Of course, Gurukulas would be different for Dhanurveda from those which were teaching, let us say, the four Vedas. So, ancient system of education was a very, very diverse system. And it had all the spiritual disciplines as well as the material disciplines. And there is enough evidence in history that people went to learn a particular kind of a vidya to the right kind of college or the Gurukul or the Guru as you go today. So this is a very romanticized idea of ancient India, that the ancient Gurus were teaching only, creating only philosophers or bhaktas. It's not true. Ubhay. both were being taught. And that's what we are saying today. I mean, even in modern universities, you have to teach moral and religious values. What is the biggest tragedy of modern Indian education? That it is only secular. Please wake up from this dream of and this disease of secularism. What is secularism? Secularism believes that this body is the only reality. Ridam kritva ghritam pibet bhasmi bhutasya dehasya punaragamanam kutaha. Take loans and loans and loans, don't pay them back, run away to England. Because this body...
That is what Madhya has done.
So, that is what secularism is. And that is why we don't teach the so-called religious texts, whether of Hinduism or Islam or Christianity, in our education institutions. And therefore we have created two generations of people who have no idea of religious values, even of the religion into which they are born. So we have to teach both. You have to teach the spiritual, you have to teach the moral, the ethical, and you have to teach the practical. How to make a living, and a good, respectable living, a productive living.
Professor Gupta, you spoke about what we need to learn and what we can take from the Smritis. Now, for the sake of even-handedness, could you please tell us what we should not take from the Smritis? What we need to reconsider very critically and perhaps even reject?
Thank you. Because this is an excellent way of what is called anvikshiki or analysis. That yes, I find this very good, but what is it that I find I should reject? So what is it which is to be rejected? Now,
Or at least very critically reflect upon it.
yes, not to be taken or not to be rejected. You see, one of the things, or there are many things that cannot be that cannot be accepted. It is like this, that the rigidity of roles which existed in simpler pre-technological systems, in systems which were not so mobile, when populations could not move, when certain sections of society could not become influential as they can today. So that system which prohibits you from keeping those constraints and which are present in the Dharma Shastras, they should not be accepted. However, most of those systems have been discarded anyway. I mean, for instance, the whole question of Shraddha. Yes, you are performing Shraddha, but Shraddha today is not a legal obligation. We have discarded the whole idea. Shraddha today is more of an understanding that yes, I have the concept of my ancestors, but that I should feed so many Brahmins, that it should be on that particular day, that it should be when the bank of the river, that a certain ritual should essentially be performed. This attitude, which was very helpful at its given time, this needs to be either given up or it needs to be re-examined. I mean, I'll give you a very simple example. I call myself a Hindu, but I don't wear a tripund. 100 years ago, it was essential for me to declare that I am a Shaiv or a Vaishnava or whatever is my sampradaya, because that was my identity. It was essential. Such was the social custom. Today, it is counterproductive. Because I don't want that division or that slotting to be the first thing. I have my concept of what is Hinduism, or my obligations as a Hindu, or my duties as a Hindu, or my religious practices as a Hindu. But a constant declaration in ways of dress, in ways of speech, is not required, because it becomes obstructive in modern life. So there are many things which we were doing, which we have partly given up, and which we should not revive. And at the same time, we should not even tolerate the modern versions of it. Unfortunately, the old things we have been quite successful in giving up. Chua-chut has been given up, but there is a new chua-chut which has come in.
Replacement.
It is not only political, it is physical. I live in New Delhi. There was a time when I could drive through the front part of the presidential palace from east to west. Everybody could drive through. Today, I can't go close to that whole huge complex because the area is sealed. There is, you see, a new untouchability.
I have two interventions to make.
Sir.
So firstly, see, you said that, see, you mentioned this example of, in the 8 kinds of marriages that the Manusmriti describes. That a father or a family could give away its daughter to a rishi, or a guru giving away his daughter to his best student. Now what if the daughter did not want to marry the guru or the shishya or the rishi? The first question. The second question is, under the Special Marriages Act today, even that does not take cognizance. It does not ask the man or the woman what religion they come from, what jati they come from. All they ask is that they consent to marry each other, isn't it? So that fact exists today, and that provision is there.
See, the Dharma Shastras nowhere say, marry your daughter even if she is unhappy in marrying the relationship that you are offering. The fact that she should be married happily is a presumed factor. You see, the Dharma Shastra does not say that you should first, it does not, it presumes that you will give away the daughter to the priest, provided she has consented. You will not force on it.
No, but there seems to be a presumption there that the daughter should be happy, that the daughter should be happy.
No, there is the notion.
There is no.
No, just a minute. What I said was that the difference between modern and ancient system is that today we presume that the daughter would be unhappy because the father is doing it. Whereas according to the ancient values, the daughter would be happy to marry a rishi or a ritvik of that high repute. That's what I am saying. Now, there is no point in arguing that every daughter would be happy. I'm sure there must have been many cases where the daughters were married against their will.
There are instances of girls refusing to marry the persons fixed by their parents.
Yes.
Fathers.
That's also.
Even in the case of Krishna also that happened.
Yes.
There are, you see, so these are general norms.
Freedom was allowed.
And it is presumed that you would do it with the consent. But I don't claim that every daughter was married according to her will, and that there was no oppression in ancient India. I would never dream of making such a claim, because it is unfounded, it is wrong. It happens even today. And sometimes it is done out of greed. Very often.
think we'll take one more question.
Sir, let me thank you for such a beautiful talk. Sir, my question is this, that we talk so much about Indian education system, the Gurukula system, and it has sustained for such a long period of thousands of years on the Vedic system. As we learn from the recent history of India, like the post-colonization history, we understand that it was Macaulay who actually realized that the Indian education system is the root cause for the unity, and he tried to demolish it, and he brought some British education laws, and from then onwards it was the decline in the value system or the education system. I always find it so curious that such a system which sustained for such a long time, from thousands of years, just by a simple law from foreigners, how could it lose its value? Are we Indians, are we responsible for losing ourselves, or is it because a person from another country actually did it? So where shall we put the blame, or how can we revive back at least to be more positive?
Yes, your question is, how did this happen? Why did this happen? Now, enough has been said about my colleague. One need not go into that. You see, the decline in Indian systems of education set in much earlier. All the major universities of India, they were gradually wiped out from 12th, 13th century onwards. We have records of some like Nalanda and Udantashila and Vikramshila and many. So that was the Islamic phase. That there was no system of sustaining the university. See, there were universities which were sustaining learning and which were sustaining the diversity of learning. Then there was a decline in the prosperity of the country as a whole. Even when country became prosperous, as it did under the rule of the Mughals for quite a while, the system of patronage had changed. As a matter of fact, the real fact is that during the Islamic rule, it is not only to the so-called Hindu Vidyas that state patronage was very poor. It was very poor to all systems of knowledge. And there were no universities, there was no concept of establishing universities. One of the great repositories of learning in India were the temples. The temples were not just what we see the temples as today, that you go there and you stop your car in front of your temple, sitting on the steering, you do this and you then press the accelerator and go. No. These were centers of learning. There was music there, there was dance there, there was Shastrartha there, there was scholars and poets and writers, and they were sustained by the big temple complexes. So these were the ancillary universities. And it is a fact that most of them were wiped out under the fury of iconoclasm. So it has been a very gradual decline of institutional loss. When the British come, they, as a matter of fact, establish education. But it was in their interest to establish according to their civilizational values, and you can't blame them. They did a good job of it in their interest. And it is for us now to take things in a direction where the values, the skills that were once used in ancient India are revived. They can be revived today. If we have done nothing for 70 years, then we can't blame the British anymore. It is for us to take up the challenge.
One more last question, please. Anybody?
Yes, I have. Sir, adding to what the previous question raised, this problem of we people not doing anything. See, today the socio-political discourse that has set in on the Indian scene is quite oppressive. You spoke about the salutary effect that Manusmriti has, but we have created a new Manuvadi who is to be oppressed, who is to be condemned, who is to be degraded, denied, everything. Now, this seems to be on the top of the minds of many people, the majority. Everyone believes that we have been oppressed for thousands of years, which is not the case. Even if it is said in this kind of seminars by people who are well informed of the history of the education system and social science, social institutions, nobody is prepared to believe. And that, I feel, is the biggest block which is stopping us from further progress. I am really worried about it. I'm a teacher, I have been interacting with students and also others. Everybody says, and whoever it is, especially people in the politics, they say we have been oppressed for thousands of years, which is not the case. The recent example is Dharmapal's book, just before the advent of British education system, how each and every village had its own education system. It was sustained, the expenses were given by the village people. So there is a lack of understanding of the even immediate history. I mean, how do we cope with this? I find it a big block.
I am thankful that you have brought up this crucial problem, which is to be confronted here and now.
Exactly.
Now, you see, you can do it by just one approach, and that is to bring the facts and figures in front of people who have created this whole false system of propaganda. It's a propaganda war that has been unleashed within India and outside India. And if you want to fight this propaganda war, what you have to do is not just to say a few things as counter-product propaganda. You know, it doesn't have to be a debate between CPM and BJP.
No,
It has to be a debate between those who have created a propaganda and those who should now bring the knowledge of the classical texts, the medieval texts, the ancient texts, and show people that, look, this is what is the fact and this is how we have been conducting our life. So I think we are faced with the challenge of first studying our own text. See, things can only begin by a deep study of all kinds of evidence, not just the text, but epigraphic evidence, historical study, study in terms of different kinds of cultures, people, and so many evidences of the institutions. You see, the institutions which preserved documents. There are so many institutions in India which preserved history and accurate history of things that have happened. So I think once we start in that direction, there will be a reversal.